We are so honored to have with us today a very special guest, someone whose family history is deeply woven into the fabric of Mount Zion and the history of St. Petersburg itself.
Her father was a pillar of this community, and today she's going to take us back to a moment in history that many of us never knew happened right here in our city. Please welcome Miss Kamara Garrett Cooper.
Miss Kamara, before we dive into this incredible story, can you start by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your father and his connection to Mount Zion?
Sure, Jada. I am the eldest daughter of the Reverend Wilkins Garrett Jr. and Brenda Garrett. My father served as the pastor here at Mount Zion from 1980 to 1999.
That's such a beautiful legacy. Now, people know Reverend Jackson as a national figure, but we heard that the connection between him and your father goes way deeper than that. Can you take us back to where that bond actually started?
So it started in Greenville, South Carolina at the Springfield Baptist Church. Jesse's mother and my grandmother were best friends, and that is where my father met Jesse Jackson. He served as kind of like a mentor to him.
So they were practically family from the very beginning. As they both got older and started walking to their own paths, how did their journey stay connected?
Now, Reverend Jackson was about 9 years older than my dad, and after Jesse graduated from Sterling High School, which was the black high school under segregated Greenville, he received a football scholarship to the University of Illinois.
And for those watching, Sterling High School was the black high school in Greenville during segregation, a time when African American students were shut out of many opportunities, yet still producing greatness. Jesse Jackson was proof of that.
And then he transferred to North Carolina A&T. Now, my dad ended up moving with his mother and stepfather to Hope, New York, but eventually in 1968, he came to Indiana University, which is not that far from Chicago where Jesse was living. So that's why they were able to stay connected, and Jesse continued to be a mentor to him.
That is powerful. So here you have two young men from the same neighborhood, the same church, walking into history in their own right. Was Reverend Jackson still a presence in your father's personal life as they grew into college?
Absolutely, so much so that when my father was ready to propose to my mom in 1971, it was Reverend Jackson who actually drove him to Gary, Indiana, to her parents' home in order for him to make that proposal.
Wait, he literally drove him to the proposal? That tells you everything about the kind of relationship they had. Now, let's fast forward to 1984. Can you paint a picture for us of what was happening in the country and what brought Reverend Jackson to St. Petersburg?
So Reverend Jackson, by that time, was a part of the SCLC, the Rainbow Coalition, and he was running for president. In 1984, Jesse came, and I remember he preached at the church.
It's a way of saying it's one thing to say, Reverend Garrett, you helped restore my son from drugs. You helped reunite our family. You took a small church and a few fish and a little bread, and it multiplied. And now you've made us proud with a great church. Big, growing, fastest growing church in town.
And he wanted to get the support for all of his endeavors, and of course he called on his friends to do that. I remember that we marched the city basically to say up with hope and down with dope. If you don't know about the 80s, the crack epidemic was just horrible. And right here on this property, there were crack houses everywhere. My father's vision was to get people off the street and get them saved. And Jesse had that same vision and came to help out with that as well. So together, they were still uplifting the community and us as a people.
And for our viewers to understand this moment, 1984 was a historic year. Reverend Jesse Jackson became the second African American in U.S. history to mount a serious campaign for president in the United States of America. St. Petersburg's black community, like many across the country, were energized. Unemployment in black communities was hitting hard during the Reagan era, and Reverend Jackson's campaign gave people a renewed sense of hope and political power. What was it like having Reverend Jackson not just as a public figure, but as someone who actually came through your home?
Uncle Jesse was funny. He was extremely funny. But it was such an honor to have him there, and just to be in our presence and to be a part of history. Huge honor. Matter of fact, Reverend Jackson kind of looked at this as his home away from home, you know, his vacation place. He used to love staying at the Don Cesar, and my father would always take him to the Hurricane, where they had the best grouper sandwiches.
The Don Cesar, that iconic pink palace on St. Pete Beach, and the Hurricane restaurant were landmarks of this city. The fact that Reverend Jackson made them part of his St. Pete experience says a lot about how much he genuinely loved being here. Beyond the visits and the meals and the friendships, what was the deeper mission that your father and Reverend Jackson shared when they walked these streets together?
Their mission was to uplift our community. Their mission was to uplift our race. Their mission was to make sure that we felt empowered, and no matter how much we would go to work or to school or just be out and be downtrodden, their mission was to lift our heads. And I think that both of them were able to accomplish that mission. Their mission was, I guess, to put it in a short phrase, I am somebody. We've heard Reverend Jackson say that all the time. We are somebody. They wanted to make sure that we understood and knew that we were someone.
Ms. Kamara, thank you for sharing something so personal and so powerful with us today. You've given us a window into St. Petersburg history that deserves to be remembered and celebrated.
Reverend Jesse Jackson spent his entire life reminding our people of their worth, their voice, and their power. And knowing that Mount Zion, our Mount Zion, was a home base for that mission makes this place even more sacred.
We know that his passing leaves us with a tremendous void, but it's not just for his family, but for the generations of people whose lives were shaped by his courage and his conviction.
St. Petersburg had the privilege of knowing him not just as an activist or a candidate, but as a man who loved grouper sandwiches and genuinely loved this city.
We are going to miss Reverend Jesse Jackson deeply.
But his words will always remind us, we are somebody.